Hello everyone, in this video I'll be showing you my table build for my 3D printer. So I started out by taking this paint grade poplar board and cutting it to 12 by 16. I originally wanted to do 16 by 16, but the board was only 12 inches wide, so it still worked out just right, and went ahead and sanded it down with 120 grip and then switched to 220 to finish it off. And for the legs, I took a piece of 2x4, cut it to 2 feet in length, and then ran it through the joiner so that way I would have a flat bottom when I ran it over the table saw to cut the piece in half for the legs. So ran it over the joiner, gave me a nice smooth and flat edge. Before I cut the piece in half, I ran it through to take down the dulled edges to give me a nice sharp cornered piece to make the legs out of. I noticed that my dust collector wasn't doing too well, and this is the dust collector I made before in my video that I will link here at the end of this video. Doesn't require a vacuum. A vacuum would be better, but I don't have that set up, so it wasn't collecting as I thought it would. I opened it up and it was full, so went ahead and emptied that out. Pop the cap back on and put it back in place. Just took a couple minutes to empty that out, and it lasts a while before it fills up. Went ahead and cut the piece in half now. And there are two nice leg pieces. Went ahead and took my top piece and the legs and started to lay out a little bit. Used my 3D printed 1/2 inch spacer block, and then after I spaced it out 1/2 inch from the outsides, I went ahead and measured the inside width, and it turned out to be exactly 12 inches. So I took a 2x4 and I cut it to 12 inches to fit inside there. And like normal, I went to start it and realized that I didn't have this all plugged in. I only have one outlet in this corner of the garage, and one of the plugs in the outlet is used by our freezer. So therefore I only have one of the plugs. I have an extension cord in that I plug each of my piece of equipment to, so I need to get that fixed someday. Went ahead and cut that piece, then went ahead and took it to the joiner as well to get that cut down. And one of the things I like to do is when I join is to run it through the 1/8 and then flip it around, so that way I run the other end through first, because I'm not the best joiner in the world for sure, and this helps me keep my board flat. And as I was cutting the edge of this piece again, as you see me jump here, I've always been cautious with table saws, and the piece got stuck in between the blade and the table saw. It was just wide enough, and I'm always cautious about things flying out. So I grabbed my push stick for the second one. I want to stay in the 10-finger club all my life if I can, so I should make a zero clearance insert at some point. Give me two nice 12-inch pieces. Then I also cut some 8-inch pieces as well. I ended up discarding these later as I changed my design while I was working through it and decided I didn't need them. Took my 1/2 inch spacer block and lifted the blade up to a 1/2 inch. I came up with the idea of cutting a couple grooves in the pieces that my shelf will sit in. Instead of the shelf sitting on top, I could lock it in by cutting a couple grooves. So went ahead and adjusted the blade to that, and I had the table saw unplugged for this, so I was not afraid to touch the blade to get it to its highest rotation. Ran the pieces through. The first one, it was a little deep, so I still adjusted the blade a little shallower. Ran the second one, came out just about right, and but nobody will see. It'll all be hidden, but they still came out pretty good. These are my total pieces I've cut so far, so we can just take away those two pieces on the right, those 8-inch ones, as I will discard those. Laid everything on the table again to make sure it was looking right. Grabbed my Kreg jig and drilled the holes as everything was held together in this project. Kreg screws and glue. Went ahead and used some Minwax. Red mahogany was the, I guess, color of it. We used this on a previous project, and I decided to try it. I didn't know how this poplar would look, and it turned out pretty good. We were pretty happy with it. And I 3D printed some symmetrical little pyramids down there that I can just throw on the ground and put the board on, and it works good while it dries. And then use some spray paint enamel to cover it. I wish I would have used a polyacrylic to do it instead, as I believe it would have been thicker and coated it better, but this works as well, and I'll probably never notice it anyways. And while that was drying, I went ahead and sanded all the leg pieces for when I paint it here later on. I'll sand them down to 220 grit as well. Went ahead and screwed on the legs. For the first leg here, when I was screwing in the Craig screw, it stripped right out. I know the poplar, isn't a very hard wood. So with the glue, later on it stayed fine, good enough. All the other legs screwed in fine to the piece of poplar, but that one wasn't the best. But by the time I screwed everything else in, it was fine. Went ahead and measured the dimensions to cut the plywood for the bottom, and this is just regular old plywood, nothing special. Cut it to length and then to width, and it fit like a glove. Went ahead and sanded it down with 120 grit and then the 220 grit. Hand sanded the edges, so I try not to round it with a sander. Sanded it with the redhead mahogany as well, and it turned out pretty good. Then I mixed up some paint, some leftover paint we had laying around the house, just a white, and threw it in our airless sprayer. Went outside, and thankfully because of the wind, it dried really quick, so I could pretty much just keep running around it, and put quite a few coats on it until I was satisfied. And it turned out pretty good. Thank you guys for watching this video. I think the table turned out pretty good. It's definitely too nice of a table to go down in our basement, which is where I was moving my 3D printer to. So I'm going to probably put it back upstairs. So because the printer's a little noisy, I might have to make an enclosure to make it a little quieter. And that'll be an awesome video for another time. So thanks again. Everyone have a good day.